and say, good morning, everybody. This is Chris Jones. I'm with the University of Arizona, Gila County Cooperative Extension. And today we're with Bill Cook from over in Greenlee County to talk about vertebrate pests in the garden. Something going on for all of us right now. A little bit about these webinars. They are a weekly Zoom webinar, 60 minutes or less, Thursdays at 11. We feature a variety of horticultural and natural resource topics relevant to environmental conditions and residential concerns of Gila County and anywhere else that you may have a similar issue, like a vertebrate pest in the garden. And these recordings are posted at the extension.arizona.edu/Gila. There's also a cooperative extension YouTube playlist where these get put. I'll stick that into the chat list for you all, and you can take that and share it with, if you want to catch up on anything you haven't seen. And the University of Arizona is an equal opportunity affirmative action institution, and we do take that seriously. All right, here's our agenda. Thank you for those of you who have logged in on time. I had a little scare with access to the webinars. They didn't show up when I logged in 15-20 minutes ago, but I just logged out and came back in and there they were. So good, here we are too. And I'm your moderator, Chris Jones. Our topic is vertebrate pests in the garden with Bill Cook. He'll have about a half-hour presentation for us. We'll open it up for Q&A with Bill at the end of his presentation. Put your messages in the chat box, put them in the Q&A. I'll feed those to Bill. And we'll wrap up at noon. If you still got questions, and as long as Bill says he's not leaving, I'll stop the webinar and we'll just finish out the questions as we need. And with that, here you are. Bill is our Greenlee County Master Gardener Program Coordinator. He's the one with the beard, not just the hat. And Bill, it's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to be seen, I tell you. Yeah, thanks for inviting me, Chris. It's always fun to see you guys.
And we are ready to get started here. And the ball is in your court.
All righty, let me start here with this. So vertebrates in the garden. And you can see that's my garden right there in the picture. That's the infamous jackalope pulling up carrots. So you guys beware, I've been told they're migrating westward from Texas. So keep a heads up for those guys.
They've already made it to Eastern Arizona, I see.
Yeah. The big fear is that they're gonna crossbreed with the armadillos, and then we're gonna have an armadillo, which is an even bigger threat. So, so watch out for these guys.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyways, this is just kind of an outline of, dealing with vertebrates, and we're just going to kind of talk about these things a little bit further.
Bill, can I interrupt for just a second?
Yeah.
Would you put that on full screen? We're seeing the...
Oh, yes.
Yeah. There you go.
Slideshow. Here, slideshow from the beginning. There we go. That should be full screen right there. Okay. So anyways, the first step, like controlling any other pest, is know who it is, know the enemy. And there's two ways of dealing with it. You can remove them or kill them. And that's short term, except maybe for the pest you killed. But removing them and killing them, unless you do something to prevent them, their little buddies are going to be right back. So you want to identify them. You want to initiate prevention options, population reduction, and step 4 is the one that I tend to slide on, is check for reinfestation until I'm out there going, dang, they're back. So there's a bunch of ways to identify them, which is, key to any kind of prevention. There's several methods of prevention. And there's several ways of reducing the population, which we'll look at a little more in detail. The one little thing down there at the bottom, some pests have legal status. That can be kind of a a tricky situation. I know a lot of people around Duncan call it the 3 S's: shoot, shovel, and shut up. But that's kind of the general drift of this whole thing. So what kind of an animal is it? We want to kind of look at the damage. If you don't see the animal, if you see the animal, that's a big clue, but not always, because sometimes the animal you actually see is not the one doing the damage you're concerned about. So you'll want to look for, the damage, breakage, whatever. And one of the first clues, is like, is it up high, like that trunk with the shredded bark? Well, that's antler level for a deer. That's kind of a no-brainer there. And we go over here a little bit to the right, and you can see that young fruit tree is girdled right at the ground. And if we look over another to the right, we're looking here, and that was chewed below ground. So those are kind of some clues. The type of digging, the holes that they're making. Is it tidy, like a gopher? Is the soil piled neatly around the hole? Or is it like rabbits or coyotes or something like that, where the dirt is just flung all over the place? And of course, one real good clue on digging is claw marks. If you go out there in your little backyard orchard and there's a huge hole and dirt flung everywhere and claw marks in the bottom, that was probably a dog or coyote or something like that. And of course, in that situation, we want to chase that darn critter off. Well, maybe we ought to start with whatever he's digging for. Other clues, partial remains. A lot of times you'll see damage to a tree, or you'll see like fruit is missing. Well, is the fruit or say the tops of your corn or something like that, is it laying there with nibble marks? Did they chew it down and nibble on it on the spot? Or is it just plain gone? That's a clue. And of course, always look for tracks. Sometimes fruit is missing and you go out there and you look and there's no tracks, pecans, almonds, things like that. Well, if you're not seeing any tracks, that was probably ravens or some kind of a bird. If the doggone raccoons have been grabbing it, you're going to see some tracks. They're a fairly heavy animal. If it's livestock is disappearing, like your chickens, one of the big clues, was it an owl or a hawk? Was it coyotes? Was it neighborhood cats, skunks, raccoons? Look for a sign of struggle there on the ground. Check to see if it got dragged off. How much of that chicken is missing? That's also a big clue. Sometimes things like a raccoon or a skunk, they actually have the patience to sit there next to your chicken coop and wait for a chicken to get close, and they'll reach through and grab it, and they'll eat whatever parts they can pull through that fence. If your yard is well fenced and something ate the chicken out there in the yard but didn't take it over the fence, there's a clue. Might have been something like a fox or a cat that didn't have the strength to actually carry that thing completely over the fence. Droppings are a real good clue as to who's doing it. There on the top left, there's a dropping right there you really like to see. And it could be mistaken for a fox or something. But if you look, you'll see there's little pieces of teeth and bone and hair, and that's an owl pellet. The next one over, there's some hair and some seeds. More likely a coyote or a fox or something like that. which is a clue as to what you're going to do about it. A little further over, we've got the, you know, the neighborhood cats. Oops, where did we go? Rodent droppings mostly look a lot alike. It's just a difference in size. Sometimes the clue there is where you're finding them. You know, if you're finding it where the mice are scurried around, if you're finding it where rats are hiding out in the corner. If it's on your deck railing, well, there's a pretty good clue that it's squirrels, because squirrels just love to hop along the deck, you know, the railing. And rabbit and deer could be easy to confuse. They look a lot alike, except the rabbit is smaller and rounder, and the deer is more oblong and tends to be in one location instead of scattered. So the droppings, tracks are real good. Now up here to the top left, there's a track that, depending on size, would be a mouse, a rat, just about anybody in that general classification. Rodents like that have 4 toes on the front and 5 toes on the back. So we come over 1 notch there. Well, that sure looks like a rat track too, except that the hind feet are ahead of the front feet. If you've ever watched a squirrel, they kind of hop along like a rabbit. You've got a rabbit track because the hind legs, the hind feet are always make the impression ahead of the front. We've got skunk tracks. Skunk tracks are pretty easy to identify. That whole bunch, skunks, raccoons, so on and so forth, they're all real similar, except that a skunk is a lot more of a digger and it have a more pronounced claw, whereas a raccoon tends to have a more grasping fingers, that sort of thing. And the control for skunks and raccoons is fairly similar, but the damage is not. In some cases, yes, in some cases, no. Deer tracks, you don't always see the dew claw, only in soft dirt. But to differentiate your deer from your javelina, which are both common pests in Arizona, the javelina is a rounder print with, you know, with no sharp toe. You got birds, dogs, cats. And this is all stuff that we see out in our yards. The kind of damage. And when we're talking damage, you know, I don't think anybody's going to miss a pine cone, but you do know that you have squirrels when you find those half-eaten pine cones down there. Not a real good picture, but sometimes you'll know that maybe deer haven't caused a problem yet, but it's not too far away if you see their bedding. You know, if you see the grass smashed down flat where they've been laying. And sometimes what you're seeing as the pest maybe isn't. If we look at those pecans, well, it's pretty obvious the bird's been pecking them. But why is the bird pecking a little hole instead of taking the whole thing off or breaking it in half? The bird is pecking a little hole because there's an insect in there. So that tells you have an insect problem. Chewing marks on a cantaloupe. Your corn, by the time your corn gets that big, the only thing that's going to chew it down is probably a deer or, you know, escaped livestock, goats, cows, so on and so forth. Antlers can do a lot of damage. We go here to this pine tree in the middle. Something's been chewing the bark on the pine tree. Well, as high up as it's gone, that's pretty obvious that that's a porcupine. Wires, rodents love wires, birds peck peaches. It's all part of the clue as to who's in there and what you're going to do about it. So the big thing is, what kind of damage? Is it happening in day and night, night only? And is it primary damage or is it secondary damage, as in the case of those pecans there? Other secondary damage, you might have skunks digging up your lawn. Well, the reason the skunk's digging up your lawn is because there's grubs in there. Maybe the easiest way to get rid of the skunk is to get rid of the grubs, you know, put down some milky spore or something like that, as opposed to building a fence and all that rigmarole, which will not stop a skunk if there's grubs in that grass. Snakes in the garden, that's one of my pet peeves. I found 7 rattlesnakes one year in my garden. Well, the reason they're in the garden is it's a nice, cool, comfortable, shady place, but mostly because there's gophers and rats and mice. To my pleasure, I found that getting a couple of cats to hang out and eat the rodents has reduced my incidence of rattlesnakes in the garden to like I've only seen 1 in the last 4 years. So that's a pretty sweet deal if all you have to do is feed a couple cats and not worry about the snakes. So there is here, I've got a couple of real favorite websites that I like to use for identifying things because nobody knows it all, right? So there, okay, did we get that website up? Yeah. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, that's working just fine, Bill.
Okay, all right. So this is, and the links are on the last slide. We'll make sure everybody gets them. This is the Wildlife Pest Identification Tool. And it is just the handiest thing that I have ever seen because, you know, I don't know everything about every animal and what sort of damage. So if I'm not sure, if I'm finding some damage out there, let's say I'm finding chewed up irrigation lines like that. And maybe I'm seeing some twigs being chewed on around my place. Something kind of like that. Okay, now the next thing is tracks. You just go in here and you click these things. And I'm seeing some tracks that kind of look like that. And I'm seeing some tracks that kind of look like that. And we go to the droppings and we click on what kind of droppings we're seeing around the place. Seeing maybe some of those and some of those. And then we go up here to see selections. And what this is going to do is, oh wait, there's my selections. Okay. This goes to my potential pest. So it could be coyotes, could be mice, squirrels. Anyways, I just think that this, you know, for a free website that's just out there to use, I think this thing is great. So, you know, I recommend it to people if you're, you know, I mean, maybe somebody out there is a wildlife tracker and knows all this, but I know I sure don't. So then, now we know what it is. Now we're ready to take some action. One thing to remember, for every action, there is a reaction. So you do want to think this through. And this darn little toolbar is right in the way. Here we go. Okay. So let me get this out of the way. I can move that again. Maybe I can put it down here. There we go. Okay, so this is another website that I like to use. So now we have some idea what the animal is. So let's say we've determined it's a rat. Well, come on. Internet's really slow here today. So we've determined it's a rat. We're wondering, you know, how much damage are these guys going to do? How long is the damage going to continue? You know, I mean, sometimes you'll find out you get a little more rodent traffic when they're getting ready to hibernate. You know, we're coming on winter, they're storing up for the winter. Well, maybe they're about done, you know, depending where you live, if you're in a cold place. If we're finding quail out there eating our sprouts as they come up, you know, we planted some cucumbers and corn. Well, it's not like you have to get rid of the quail forever. In that case, you realize a quail only eats the sprouts. So if you can just cover it till it's up to 4 or 5 leaves, you know, 6, 8 inches tall, well, then the quail's not a problem. So that's a lot of the issue is this really a problem? And if so, for how long? So we come in here, we look at rats. It explains the different kinds of rats, how to spot an infestation, damage, management, sanitation. And this is one of the things I really like about this website, and a couple that I'm going to show you. They explain a little bit in there about cleaning up the mess, wear a mask or whatever, and what sort of potential disease that these things carry. There's options here for population control, trapping, electrocution, glue boards, all this good stuff, rodenticides, a lot of really, really good information here. And they go into some pretty good detail on how these rodenticides act, how to use them, that sort of thing. And there is, in a box here, there's kind of a warning, you know, if you're going to start using this stuff, because like I was saying, you know, your actions might carry more than one reaction. The problem with putting out bait for rodents is that pets can get into it, children can get into it. If you do poison a bunch of these gophers, rats, mice, where's it going to die? You know, is it going to die out there in the driveway where your dog can find it? So some of these methods, maybe they work, but they might not be first choice. And in some cases, what is the value? Is it a protected animal? We can go over here to woodpeckers. Identification in biology, it explains to you what they're doing, why they're doing it. So if you're going to start repelling them, what they're doing and why they're doing it is a real good clue to how to get rid of them. Exclusion. And if anybody else is having problems with woodpeckers getting up under the eaves and pecking, I have found that tanglefoot works really good. I actually found some online in a caulking tube. So if you're applying that along a perch up under the eaves, that caulking tube makes it so much easier. So here's all the guidelines on, you know, scaring them off, repelling them. But again, we come into this part, legal status. Woodpeckers are protected. So that is something to consider, unless you're one that holds to the shoot, shovel, and shut up. But I really wouldn't say I'd recommend that. So to prevent them, why are they here? What are they doing here? Let's see. And here is yet another really good website. Why are they here? Well, we're talking about woodpeckers. I mean, you know, the answer is pretty obvious for most critters why they're there. Food, water, and shelter, right? But sometimes it can be a little bit more. So this is wildlife removal, another free website. You can go through here. If you really care, you can identify which species you have. But there's a section here on inspection. So why are woodpeckers drilling my house? This is one I never knew until I started looking it up. After I had woodpeckers, of course, they like the sound. So it's not entirely a nesting thing. They like the sound, so they'll beat on the side of, I've seen them beat on metal flashing, which you know good and well they can't get through. They do make a hole to nest, and they do eat insects. So this particular website has all kinds of animals, and more than you ever thought you would need to know. So once you've got them figured out and you know what they're doing and why they're there, the next thing to do is remove incentive. You know, like if raccoons are eating your pet food, don't leave the pet food out at night. Skunks, I found that the easiest way to prevent the skunks from eating cat food and dog food, well, the cat food in particular, I just put it up on a ledge where the cats could jump up and get at it. And skunks apparently are not jumpers, because I only raised it about belt buckle high, and they either don't jump or haven't found it yet. So exclusion works good. You can fence, you can put a row cover, like in the case of the quail that only eat your corn until it's 3 or 4 inches tall. Throw some floating row cover over it. Floating row cover also works on fruit trees, way better than the bird netting. The problem I've had with bird netting is that too many of the things I want to keep, like lizards, get caught in it. Lizards and snakes, they get in it and they can't get out. And of course, you need those guys. Snakes eat rodents and lizards eat insects. So, and of course, if the round to it's not happening, if you leave your bird netting up, the tree will go through it and it'll become nearly impossible to get it off. You'll wind up cutting it. Repellents, Tanglefoot, which is one of my all-time favorites. If you're not familiar with it, you can buy it down at the nursery. It's sticky, nasty stuff. Also makes a good grafting sealer, but nothing likes to get it on their feet. So you put Tanglefoot in the path, well, they're not going to come back. I found dangling a bar of soap on the rose bushes works to a degree. Human hair. I know a lot of people that have indoor cats use the kitty litter down the gopher holes, and they swear it works. And another good repellent is what I call the fallen comrades. It sounds awful, but if you've ever had things eating up your garden and you're at wit's end and ready to try anything, it's not that hard where I live to just drive around and you can find roadkill rabbit. And if you take those rabbit pieces and attach them, like stake them in the garden so the dogs and coyotes don't drag them off, I have found a rabbit will not go anywhere near dead rabbit parts. So as disgusting as it sounds, I can tell you it works. You can haze them. I have seen people hook up motion sensors to lights, sprinklers, sirens. The best hazing technique I've ever had is a dog that chases them. You can do habitat modification. You can remove hiding places. In the case of bats, you can foil their navigation, and it really does work. Just take strips of tinfoil about 1 foot long and a couple inches wide and just staple them up under the eaves where the bats are going. And I was told that that messes with their navigation. The other thing you can do is you can put food and water somewhere else. That really, really works for the quail. I started putting quail water far, far from my garden, and the darn things have been over there getting a drink there instead of my garden. Plant selection, you can plant things. There's a real good U of A publication. It's AZ1237 on deer resistant plants, that sort of thing. Final straw is population reduction. And again, is it legal? Snap traps, sticky traps, zappers, that all works. Live traps to relocate animals. The problem with trapping them live, now that you have it, what are you going to do with it? The other problem is I have caught skunks in a live trap when they were not the target, and that is absolutely no fun. Shooting, not many people live in a place where they can shoot at their pests. You can poison them, but there's too much collateral damage, and anything that survives the poison breeds a resistant population. I have seen burrows fumigated for everything from gophers to badgers, and I'm not sure how long that works. Or you can introduce predators, and introducing predators is always a good thing. There was a bunch of farmers down by McNeil in Cochise County that were installing burrows, permanent burrows with PVC pipe for burrowing owls to nest in. And they claimed a pretty substantial reduction in the rodent population. So there's a lot of things you can do. The drawbacks of killing them, is it legal? Your chances of throwing off the balance are pretty darn good, because you know where there are pests, there are predators, and the numbers are supposed to even out. Left to nature's way, they do. And when you start getting rid of things, you're sort of causing a ripple effect in the balance of nature. The other thing, you know, if you shoot that fox that's out there menacing the cats, well, it could be she has a litter of pups somewhere and you've just created orphans that are going to starve. So these are all things, you know, to consider. And of course, I for that reason, I highly recommend just repel them, deter them, or whatever, if you can. So
Bill,
yeah,
just had one clarification from a viewer.
yeah.
You're not showing slides at this time, are you?
No, I'm sharing some websites.
Right. Okay. Just confirm.
Yeah, and I've got the links. There's several websites here, which I am going back.
I'm sorry to interrupt on that, but
oh no, that's fine.
I felt like you were just talking from notes and you just still had the website up.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm just looking at
you weren't supposed to
notes in the website. Yeah, that's what's going on.
Okay.
So here, I've got some links to share. That wildlife pest identification tool, UC Davis, IPM. There's a couple real good websites there on pest, the biology of the pest, basically the information that you need to determine a course of action. Wildlife removal, there's some species information here on this other one. And down here at the bottom, the Backyard Gardener series from Yavapai County. And if you go into that Backyard Gardener series, you know, there is no one big particular page or article about vertebrate pests, but when Jeff was writing the weekly articles, he covered them all. So if you go in here to the Backyard Gardener and do a search on, say, deer, you know, or rabbits, you'll be able to find an entire article on that particular pest. So that's pretty much the let me see, stop share. So that's my slides, and that's the websites that I'd like to share with you. So I think we're to the questions part.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Bill. That was really informative. I hope people took a picture of that slide. And can you post the links into the chat? It's going to be easier for me to get those out because we're going to be grilling Bill right now, asking lots of questions.
Okay. Yeah.
But I'll get that shared when I get this information back up. We could again, what I do is I just get out my cell phone. I take pictures of slides that are really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one thing I'd like to do at this point, I put together that poll for the AAP5 for our affirmative action. So let me just put that up, and folks, it takes just 10 seconds to respond to it. So I'm just going to launch that, and I'll leave it up here for a couple of minutes, and we'll get into some questions with Bill here. So the first question we got was, what do you recommend as an environmentally friendly way to get rid of house mice?
Well, mice are they're kind of tough. You know, the first thing is to mouse-proof your house so they're not coming and going. One of the, and it's amazing when you start looking, because I've done this myself. You start going up under the kitchen sink where the pipes come through the walls. You've got your hot and your cold water, and a mouse can crawl through a hole that's only about 1/4 of an inch. So what I've done before is to stuff those with steel wool, chink them, so to speak. Steel wool, it really makes it easy. Look around your baseboards and go outside and like caulk, where depending whether you have stucco or siding, but a lot of times when your house starts getting older and wood and concrete and stuff begins to shrink, you start getting little gaps where they can get through the bottom plate. Make sure your doors shut tight. That sort of thing. Very, very first thing is just to make sure they cannot come back, because they're outside breeding the whole time. And as far as mouse friendly, I can't think of a thing myself. I do know people that have electronic zappers. I know people that live trap them and put them outside. And if you're live trapping them and putting them outside, you better really make sure that things are sealed up. And I can tell you this from personal experience, because I was trapping and throwing mice outside, and I was thinking I was making no headway. And someone suggested that I mark one. So I did. I took a Sharpie and gave him a black ear. And sure enough, I caught that little rascal again. So sealing them out is good. Other things you can do, you can put food, like if you store grains and things like that, put them in a screw top container, something that they cannot chew through. Make sure that there is nothing there for them to eat and drink. And of course, if you can tolerate a cat in the house, there is nothing better than a cat. And actually, I don't even have inside cats, but I have found that outside cats have got the population down. I haven't had a mouse indoors in years, so I guess they just never get close to the house.
And she did say environmentally friendly. So if you're trapping the mice, that's not unenvironmentally friendly. It's not mouse friendly, as you said.
Yeah, it's not mouse friendly.
But that doesn't hurt the environment at all. And
no, and you can compost them.
and I remember when I had mice problems, I was not taking good care of my hens, and they were putting eggs in the wrong place, and mice were finding that to eat. And when the hens, and I got that cleared up, the mice problem went away too.
Yeah. And you'll always have mice outside. There is no way you'll ever get rid of mice outside. But the same thing applies, same kind of sanitation in your shed. If you have a sack of corn seed, put it in a bucket with a screw top. Don't feed them. It's the main thing.
So Susan says she's used strips of aluminum foil to keep the woodpeckers away, and it's been working for 2 years. So
good.
That's also, because I read in one of the books was use a concave mirror where it's tapping, and when it comes, it's going to see a big woodpecker, and that frightens it.
Really?
Yeah, I might have been Texas A&M, but I remember reading that on one of the websites.
It's not going to come back with a dozen roses and a bottle of wine and say, hey.
Nope, it's like, you're too big. I'm not going to fight you. You're twice my size. All right. Yep. So Jeff is asking, says he's purchased a single cycle gas motor. I put the exhaust in the holes created by the ground squirrel. Using it for 3 to 5 minutes of exhaust seems to get rid of the squirrels. Have you heard about this? So using a fumigant.
Yeah. Yeah. Many, many years ago, I was working on a golf course, and that was one of the things that we did for gophers. And when we inadvertently live trapped a skunk, we would throw a tarp over it and put the exhaust under that tarp to kill the skunk. So it does work. And of course, if you have some old engine, we were using old Cushmans that had a manual choke. You pull out that choke a little bit and make it smoke, and it really, really worked.
Carbon monoxide is poisoning.
Yeah, but it worked real well on
gophers. That's okay with squirrels, but I wouldn't do that with a skunk.
Yeah. Well, the skunk was in a trap, and nobody wanted to open the door. So from a distance, we threw a tarp over it. And
now, my experience with ground squirrels, they do not like mothballs.
No, they don't.
So there's a fumigant, but you can also just use a smell that can repel them, and that can get them out. Mm-hmm. But you gotta, if they're under the deck, you gotta find their nest and take care of that. And Elsa's got a great question here. Says fabric softener or peppermint or Irish Spring soap. We've heard this one to get rid of house mice. What do you think of that Irish Spring?
I've never heard that.
No.
I'll be darned. I've also heard rodents, if you give them chewing gum, that they'll eat it and it'll kill them. They don't digest it or something.
Yeah.
Huh.
Okay, so we got a few questions over here in the Q&A. So that may or may not be so effective, but I've heard some of those things too. All right, and Karen's asking the question I want to ask. What do you recommend for getting rid of gophers?
Well, for starts, back to my favorite predator, cats. I got cats years ago because I was finding rattlesnakes in my garden, and I spend a lot of time on my hands and knees, picking bush beans and stuff. And somebody said, get some cats. And the cats have wiped out the gophers. They've wiped out the mice. I mean, you may not live in a place where you can keep cats around, but if you have enough ground for gophers, you probably have room for a cat. That's one way of doing it. I've tried drowning them with very limited success. And of course, trapping. Now there is a tool that I've used around the annex here. Obviously at the county building, I can't have a bunch of cats running around. I guess I could figure something out, but it's a gopher spike. It's got like a box on the top, a bait box with two handles and a long rod with a hardened tip and a little trap door. What you do is you take this thing and you poke around until you find the run, and you'll know when you hit a run because you'll just fall through. You crank the handle, you give it a measured amount of this bait that they eat. And the guy, old Dennis, used to be the pest control guy, was explaining to me that this one particular bait that we were using, that they would carry it back to their nest. They don't die immediately, and they carry it back to their nest, and they feed it to their young, whatever. They put it in the pantry, but they all die at home in bed, deep underground, which to me is good. If you got to use poison, I want that corpse someplace where a hawk, coyote, my dog, my cat, where none of them are going to get a hold of it, and die from eating it. So the tool, actually, I bought my tool down at Home Depot, and the bait that Dennis was recommending, I'm getting at the corner hardware store. It's called Gopher Go. If you do decide to get one of those tools, when you buy bait, this is big because I know people that have told me, I bought one and it didn't work. Not just any bait will feed through that tube. It needs to be like BBs, like millet or something like that, like, you know, like a grain, maize, sorghum, millet. Some of the baits that you buy at hardware stores are on long, slender grains like a rye. Some of them are little square, like a miniature alfalfa cube. Those do not feed through the tool. So make sure if you buy the tool, and it does work real well, that you get the bait that will feed properly through it, or you're spitting in the wind.
I think if the gophers have a lot of runs, gophers are always going to be coming in and finding it. The interesting thing about gophers is they're solitary creatures. And you wouldn't think that they could put all those holes in your yard, just like, that's just one gopher.
Yep.
You know, so after they mate and have some young, the young go out and look for a new place or a new run to take over. So they're always coming back in.
Yep.
So if you've got a garden space, you might just rototill it. If you know you've got lots of runs, you know, I don't know if that can destroy it. That disturbs the whole surface, but at least you could take out those runs and try to have a new go of it, so that they aren't just keep on coming in. And but they're all, for me, it's an annual. It's all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and a new gopher will re-inhabit the run.
Right.
Because like at my place, one of the garden areas, I have neighbors that, you know, have gophers. And so I have gophers coming that way. Every time I have them, they're coming that way, which kind of makes it easy because all I have to do is go up and down that fence with that gopher tool, you know, and catch them on the way. But I have found that, you know, you'll wipe out the gophers, and not too much later, you know, maybe months, maybe next year, but you'll have more gophers in that same run. So they come back.
Yeah. And I think like a light, like the old Manus tiller, something simple, you might be able to take out a lot of those. See if you can take out the runs, because they'll use them all the time.
Yeah. You know, I have put ready mix. You know how they have the air holes? I have poured ready mix concrete down
into them.
Well, and the story is, what you're supposed to do is you fill them all with ready mix, let it harden, and then you run around the yard stomping your feet and you stampede them, and they run head on into that ready mix, and it knocks their lights out.
I'm sure it does.
Yeah, but actually plugging their holes with concrete has kind of slowed them down too. You know, you get desperate.
Yeah. But we've all seen Caddyshack. You get desperate.
Yeah. Haven't tried explosives yet. It sounds kind of fun.
Well, you might have some neighbors, you know, so
yeah.
Anyway, Karen asked also how to deter rock squirrels from digging under the foundation of the house. So,
well, and that's a really tough one. Number one, why are they digging under the foundation? Well, it's not as simple as like skunks digging in your yard. They're not digging up grubs. They're just being little psycho squirrels. And I think what they're really after is to burrow under your house. And what I've done in that case before is I've just laid chicken wire down, just a strip of chicken wire. And I have found that sometimes they'll try to get behind it. So I take it and I bend it in an L like that and lay it against the wall with rocks. So if you bend it in an L shape, little up the wall and a little bit out in front, I haven't seen them yet figure out if they back up a foot and start digging. You know, so an L shape of chicken wire works real well. The same thing works for rabbits digging under your fence.
Mm-hmm.
Same exact thing. Just put that around the outside of your fence and you're good to go.
Yeah. Okay. And Steve's is commenting that he's gotten bird tape at Lowe's, comes one side red, one side silver, comes by the roll, tied around the tree, and no more woodpeckers. So had good success with bird tape.
I'm going to have to stop at a Lowe's one of these days and get some of that, because that would also be good for my grapes.
Okay, and we've already had a long discussion on gophers. That was our last question here. Mm-hmm. We still got Bill with us, still got a few more minutes. Any more questions, put them on here. And so Karen commented back, so far bird spikes have been working for the rock squirrels.
The what?
Bird spikes.
Bird spikes.
So I guess what you put those spikes for the pigeons, I'm imagining she's putting them back.
Oh, okay.
Correct?
I'll be darned. Huh.
Well, whatever works, right, Phil?
Yeah, that's whatever works and doesn't get you in trouble.
And doesn't, yeah, well, on this side of the law.
Yeah, yeah. This side of the law and this side of human decency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if we're running short on questions, we don't have to go any longer than people are giving them. Thank you so much for those great websites. I'll make those available at my website and we'll get this recorded. I'm going to go ahead and show my closing slide here. Thank you to everybody who took some time out to fill out that affirmative action program for us. And so here's Bill. Thank you so much for all your time today, Bill.
Oh, you are welcome.
Good to be with you today.
Yeah.
And then we just had our Q&A. And so next week, we're going to have our other colleague back, Michael Crimmins. He's our extension specialist for climate science. He's going to be talking about something called RainLog. And it's Arizona's Cooperative Rainfall Monitoring Network. It's a webinar. And if you haven't participated with this, you become a citizen scientist and you share your information. There are many parts of Arizona where we do not have rain gauges and we just don't know exactly what's happening with the storms. And this is really something that helps with the monsoon because those thunderstorms, as you know, there's one column here. We got that one column on the mountain behind Miami. And Miami, Arizona did not get any rain, but it got totally flooded out last week. And, you know, if you were over a mile away, you wouldn't have gotten any rain. So anyway, please join us for the next week to learn what about that. If you get Mike Crimmins on, we can ask him all kinds of questions about the monsoon. And I'm looking forward to next week's webinar too. Bill, thank you very much. I'm going to bring this to a close and everybody have a good day.